Coming to you straight from the Rio Grande and beyond. Broadcasting to the four corners of the globe. So grab your seat, your coffee, or your sundowner.
Okay, everybody, here we go.
On point, as always. This is Gloves Off. Gloves Off.
Back at you and Gloves Off. I'm Paul Buitron, and I have a great guest all the way from Holland. His name and his nickname is called the Flowing Dutchman. Harbert, how are we doing today? You doing great?
Doing great, Paul. Great. And you?
Doing great here in Texas. I don't know if the weather's nice over there, but we're over here in 102, 103 weather. We just got a warning that it's going to get to, the heat index is going to be 113 today. So it's gonna be
wow. Yeah. So I'm not my the thinking of degrees is a little different for me. So I'm not really sure what the Fahrenheit is here, but at the moment it's 30 Celsius degrees here.
It'll be more or less around 40, 41. 40.
Yeah, 40. Oh, whoa, that's pretty. That's quite a lot. Well, we're not used to that here in Holland.
You're not used to that? No, you're not.
No.
Here in Texas, it's a total different entity. It's kind of like, the lizards come out at night. They don't come out in the daytime. There's everything's not nocturnal, if you go out. But anyway.
I see the same thing in India.
Is it really because of the heat?
Yeah.
See, that's what happens with these climates. Let's talking about India. You've done a lot of research, and you've done research in what's fascinating about a way of martial arts, not martial arts, it's actually training that was produced out of martial arts at one particular time, correct? The GADA and
I think almost every form of training has its roots in martial arts. As far as I'm experiencing right now, and also have experienced in India, that they all have their roots somewhere in those Asian countries, which was a bigger area than it is right now. So now they are separate countries, but from what I've heard, that first it was a very big Asia country, and from there a lot of these martial arts actually came from, and that is where most of these tools that I'm using currently also have their origin.
Right. Because what we're going to be talking about today is going to be talking about the JORI, the GADA, and how they're used and how they came now, because a lot of people know what a mace is here. A lot of people are now into the CrossFit, and everybody wants to do something a little bit different. And they've gone into, here in the United States, producing a mace. There's a lot of folks out there that lift weights and strengthen themselves by traditional Olympic barbells and so on and so forth. But there's other ways to actually be more in condition and in tune, which is these, which I found out that, to me and what I've seen, I think these are more in line with somebody that's trying to be limber and trying to be fight ready, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah, so there's a thought I recently had. A lot of the things we do right now, it's one of the ways I coach. Like I'm a mace coach here in the Netherlands and also around the world. I teach workshops as well. And what I find is most people that first touch a mace, which is quite similar to what a GADA is. So GADA is a bamboo handle with concrete at the bottom, and a mace, which I got here, right here, is a steel one. It has a hollow handle, and then it has a globe, and there's the weight. So this is a light one, but the heavier they get, the heavier the globe will be. And what everybody does when they start to train with these things, so when you give them to something, they tighten up, because that is what they learned. Like when you touch something that you're gonna lift, you tense up every muscle. And the thing is, with the mace, if you tense up, you'll you'll not be able to use the leverage in your advantage. So the leverage actually works against you. So then the 4 kilogram, which is at the end, or 5, at the end of the handle, now becomes 50 because you're holding at the end. But if you actually start to use and go with that momentum, then that pendulum ensures that you'll be able to lift it fairly easy, and also comparable to actually what it is for 5 kilogram. So it actually teaches you to let go and move with it. So you're using the weight and into your advantage, so you can increase the weight. And that is the interesting thing. And this is something that is happens in every sport. Like if you, for example, look at climbers, the ones that can do most of the pull-ups aren't necessarily a good climber, because you have to use your body. There's a lot of skill and technique involved to manipulate your weight against the wall and how to climb up. And I think the same thing is happening with the mace and also the joris. So it's a different kind of strength than is required for the more, what we call now traditional lifts, even though they are relatively new compared to these older types of sports. And it's quite logical to think in that way, because most of the training was, in the old days, had a purpose, a functionality. So for example, you can use clubs and they resemble like you're throwing a sword or holding a shield. So if you actually practice with a heavier version of your own sword and shield, you'll be able to move with that sword the whole day on the battlefield. So it had a certain advantage to it. And I even thought of like someone like Bruce Lee, who, you know, he was a small guy, but he was so powerful because he actually was able to absorb force and use it against you. And I feel like those types of strengths are also very apparent in mace training, GADA training, JORI training, like every club where you're actually using momentum. Now, there's also some critics that say, yeah, but you're only using momentum, you're not using the muscle, which is, you know, from a different perspective, yes. And then again, no, because you're also using the weight.
No, you're absolutely correct. That's within fighting, that makes total sense, because if you put this into fighting, it's at the ring. And when you tell people, put your hands up, and they do this, and the first thing they'll do is they tense up, your oxygen is going to be diminished, because lactic acid is going to start building up, right? The more tense. So when you start being very loose inside, have a loose guard and strike, and then tense up at the moment of impact, that changes the perspective of your punch or your kick or whatnot. And I saw that coming from the Oriental arts, kicking arts and punching arts, and then going into Savate, which is a French European art, it was very relaxed, just like boxing. And seeing and understanding that, and you see the two perspectives, and you understand that. So it's I see where it's coming from, because these arts are a little bit more relaxed in weight training. What you're doing, of what I've seen plenty and seen those gurus teach you.
Yeah, so the Kushti wrestling, the Kushti wrestling, where almost all of these equipments that I'm using they came from Kushti. So I did a lot of research in the Kushti world, and they have like the garnal, which is like this big ring that you like big stone ring you have around your neck, and you have to walk with it and squat with it. You have a now where you have to press the stone up. It's like a very early clean and press. And they have the GADA and the JORI, and all these things have their functionality for wrestling. And it's actually funny, because I tried wrestling. I'm not a wrestler, but it's right there, right? I'm basically coming for the materials, but I tried wrestling as well. And all the time when I try to wrestle, I'm amazed at how someone very small can just push me over and just roll me around, and I'll be on my back before I know it. Even though I'm pretty big, pretty strong, I just don't know how to use my strength. And that's interesting, because using your strength is actually much more useful than having strength.
Yes.
It's strength usually comes after, right? You perfect the skill and then you feel like, okay, what can I do after this? And then you build up the strength. So if you only build up your strength and then forget the skill, then it's like, oh, what can you actually do with it?
Absolutely. You're absolutely correct. And what else did you find out? Because that makes not only perfect sense, it's what many see. It's like, I'm going to compare this. I've had a lot of students that come in that do bodybuilding. Okay. You know, they come in here and they, you know, and you tell them, you know, you have to be relaxed, and they can't be relaxed. You have to tell them you have to be relaxed. And they get so tensed up in the head that they just stop because they can't figure out that just if you just relax yourself, you can go further out than trying to do everything with power. Understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, totally.
Kind of like power diminishes speed and skill. Okay.
Yep.
And you start seeing the telegraphing movements of their punches. You know, you get somebody that's a little bit lighter, doesn't have that much bulk, and you start seeing power. You start seeing the telegraphing. The person starts pushing the arm back to throw instead of just being relaxed from point of origin. Understand what I'm saying?
Right.
So
yeah.
And so when you see that, and when you see the relaxation in the types or the philosophies of fighting, like boxing, like fencing, wrestling, savate, you see a total different type of usage for all the muscles. And that's what I see with what you're doing. Because
Yeah,
some of those joris are pretty heavy.
Well, they're immensely heavy, and they're also intimidating. That's a fun thing. You know, I've got a jori club here. It's not that heavy. It's like five kilograms, but you know, they have them around their necks like this. So I just swing them up. And I was just editing a video from India where they were like 3 times bigger. So you can imagine that your head is like squished in between those big clubs, and they're laying on your shoulders, and they're not that comfortable to actually hold. And then you have to swing them. So it's like that's very intimidating. So it's very very impressive, and it's also, but again, you know, it's not about the strength. And people comment on my YouTube videos like, you know, because I'm you know, the bigger guy, and they're like, and one of the gurus, like, he is swinging, I'm trying that weight, and I'm like, I'm not really getting it, or I'm almost getting it. And then they compare it to like a guru who then, you know, shows how to do it. And it's like, okay, this guy, even though the 20 kilogram joris that I tried, you know, they are very heavy. So it's not that anybody would be able to do a 10 kilogram jori if they haven't had any experience, but the 20 kilogram is so, that's also impressive for them. So it's not that it's just so difficult. And that struggle, you know, that is what makes me come back, because it's like, oh, I really want to learn this. I want to perfect this and come back to it. But it's difficult to get the joris weighing 20 kilogram each here.
Absolutely. And how many times have you gone to India to study? Because you've done this several times, right?
Yeah, 4 times now. Yeah.
And how was it the first time when you first showed up? Were they very receptive, come in and train, or were they kind of stand back?
They've always been very receptive. You know, if you show interest. It's interesting because the old style of akhara is a gym in India.
Sure.
They are almost all volunteers. So it's different because it's already so old. It was before fitness was actually something that people make money out of. Like right now, it's a very big industry, but it wasn't 100 years ago. It was very, 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 very small. Just in the last 30 years, it just boomed and skyrocketed. So now everything is about money. And also in India, they have these modern gyms where they have like a small space. They just push all of the equipment in there, and people have only machines. And they're like 100 people in the small room just trying to lift, you know, and they always pay for it. So it's like, that is a separate thing that is evolving outside of the akharas, which are based around wrestling. And in Varanasi, you also have akharas that are based solely on the actual equipments that were used for wrestling. So they also have some of the competitions over there, which is not done in whole of India, but in some cities, and especially Varanasi, it is done in that particular way. So let me see, where was I going with that?
The training.
Oh, right. Yeah, the volunteers. So the people that actually run these akharas, so that are like, for example, the gurus, they come in the morning and they come in the evening, but they have their job. So they come like from 7 to 9, and then they have their job for 12 hours, and then they come back to coach another person, but it's all voluntary. So the people that train there, they help with building it and then help with sustaining it, but it's not like they pay a monthly fee or something. And the government is also not giving them any money. So it's like an art that is slowly dying because it's overwhelmed by the Western idea of training, which is actually kind of leaving the West slowly too, because kettlebells are becoming much more, every modern gym now here in the Netherlands has a free room where you can actually move free weights instead of having only machines. So it's always interesting how India is kind of lagging behind. But the fun thing that I find every time is that the thing we call modern and functional training and these very cool, sophisticated ways of moving, they were already done there,
Yeah.
The whole thing of animal flow, if you look at how the wrestlers do their push-ups, they have like 20 different types of push-up. It's like, yeah, that kind of looks like animal flow, like nothing new happening here. Even though it's, it's not to bash on those systems, but it's those essential movement patterns have been done before in the past. And that's very interesting to see. And also to experience from people that have not been exposed to these Western ways of modern training.
Sure. And, that, how can I put it? You've seen powerlifting in the past. Then they went into bodybuilding. And bodybuilding kind of surpassed powerlifting, even though powerlifting is still there. Then powerlifting stayed with all the basics and, how can I say, all the fundamentals and all the correct form. And then all of a sudden, and I'm not bashing anybody, but all of a sudden the CrossFit phenomena took off, and you're starting to get a lot of people that are injured. Understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's interesting that you said you were not bashing anybody.
You're like, well, look, where did you? I injured myself in a deadlift, or I injured myself in a clean. But then when you were in powerlifting, the injuries were rarely seen unless something major happened. You tried to break the bounds. Understand what I'm saying? Because you were taught basics, and you were taught form, and you were taught mechanics, and you were taught the precision of how to lift the weight in that precision mechanical movement. And over here, it's kind of been forgotten. Kind of people just do what they want, and you're like, that's where you start seeing that. So when you get people that are gurus that are going out there voluntarily doing it because of their heart, then that technique, that admiration for the art of it is still alive. Understand what I'm saying? You commercialize it, it's kind of like cookie cutter. Who cares? Let's keep on going.
Yeah, right.
Right. And I don't know I don't know about Holland, but in the United States, anybody can open up a gym. My wife's
here too.
Brazil, and you have to have an associate's or a bachelor's in some type of kinesiology or physical education before you can even open up a gym. Or you can open it, but you better have somebody in there that has that degree to run it.
True. When you mentioned that about CrossFit and injuries and powerlifting, because I've actually trained people in a powerlifting gym. I wasn't a powerlifter. I wasn't training powerlifting, but I was around the scene for quite a bit. And it's interesting, they are solely focused on technique. Like they start with people practicing the snatches and the cleans. They start with 10 kilogram, like having 2.5 kilogram plates on the side. the big plastic ones, and trying, snatch. It's technique, and then slowly moving up. It's the same thing, the same approach I have with the mace. Start light, learn the skill before you go on. Like, there's so many people that buy mace, and instead of buying a 5 kilogram, they buy a 12 because they can use a 24 kilogram kettlebell. They're like, okay, I can use a 12 kilogram mace. Well, they can't. So they injure themselves. And that same pattern exists, for example, in CrossFit, where, many people get injured, but that's also because they're trying very complicated moves. Like, if you really want to learn a barbell snatch, it takes a lot of time before you can even move up in weight, before your technique is actually on point. So it's interesting to see that suddenly it becomes about conditioning, so strength, building muscle, and conditioning. And then if you also incorporate skill into that, which is less done in bodybuilding. So for example, if you're a bodybuilder, you move, the machines, and the instructions are on the machines, and you go sit on the bike. So you're doing your conditioning and you're doing your strength, right? Pretty basic, pretty easy as well for most of the people. But then if you go to CrossFit, they're challenging the body in not a similar way, but they're also putting the strength in and the conditioning, but they're combining it, they're making it complex. And also they acquire a lot of skill, which is not really done in the general fitness scene. Like, skill is underrated. Absolutely. But there's a lot of skill needed for that, to complete those moves, especially with the weight and the time frame and the conditioning aspect with it. So the top athletes, they're the top athletes. Absolutely. Because they're actually combining everything. So it's not I see those athletes and I'm like, yeah, those are strong. Well, they're athletes. They they can step into any sport and be pretty good, pretty fast, because their body is optimized. But then the people that are at the bottom, the big bottom, they also try to become stronger. And then you might say, yeah, maybe you should first focus on your skill before going up in weights that fast.
Absolutely. And I couldn't agree with you more. And the top athletes on those scales are phenomenal because they've taken the time and dedication to do that. This is what I say to most individuals. When you go train in something that's new, forget about speed, forget about all that. Start learning the skill, start learning the basics. And here in Savant, we have a saying that goes, a man that's good at his basics is a hard man to beat. You always have to come back to your basics. True. And I don't care what martial art you're in, you have to do your basics. And that's what I've seen here from powerlifting to bodybuilding. In powerlifting, you had a coach that told you you're doing it wrong. Do it this way. And you're not going to go from here until you're doing it correctly. And then I know. Then you can go into the gyms, but that's a different time frame and a different story. But let's
also, but it's also because it's for a sport. Like in powerlifting, it's still, there are a certain way with a certain weight, so you weigh a certain amount, and then you have to lift a certain amount. So it's a lot based around getting. It's a sport more than, CrossFit is also a sport, but bodybuilding is less of a sport because it's. The goal is not the actual thing that you're doing, it's the effect of it. And so that's why skill is also so important, because they know you have to have proper skill to actually get to that point.
Absolutely. And not knocking around the top guys, because they were all phenomenal in all areas, whether it's bodybuilding, powerlifting, as well as CrossFit. They all learned, they all took the time to learn the technique, and they spend the amount of time to perfect it to get to where they're at. That's dedication. But you get the masses that go in there, they're not going to have that dedication time. They just want to see, it's like a microwave. I press a button, this is what I got, so this is what I'm going to try to get at. that's when things occur. And unfortunately, it happens. But let's touch base. Let's touch on the GADA. Pronounced GADA?
Yeah, I think you'd say GADA.
GADA.
Yeah, it's GADA.
And I've seen you in some of your videos, and folks out there, you all should go, and we'll put the link up here for you to follow what Hubert has been doing, because he's done an excellent job of documenting a process of a dying art, which is phenomenal. And there's some that have nails, right?
Yeah. Yeah, those are crazy. It was, some people say, like, why would you do that? That is a big risk. And I'm like, yeah, if it's like you have a sport, what is there's also in strongman, there are a few things that strongmen have lifted, right? So if you are a strongman, you want to lift these legendary things, right? That there's this glow around it. And for me, that same thing happened with those nail joris, those nail gadas, because I realized there aren't so many people who actually swing them because they are afraid of it. And that gives me that extra push and like, okay, I'm challenged. Let's go. let's try. Like it has to, it seems to be going okay. So if I swing, and I also found out, like, if you're swinging the joris and the gada, you're usually not touching yourself. So the width of them should be equal, but still it's very frightening if you're holding them in front of you and then you're looking at all those rusty nails and imagining all those stories that you kind of got an infection in India, had to go to the hospital. You're like, yeah, that's not an ideal situation.
Absolutely. How are they made? How are gadas made? How are joris made? Is it a specific craftsman that does it, or
the joris are specific craftsmen? So it's made from hardwood. There are not too many carpenters who can make them, even though the original ones. So there are if you go in India to a carpenter and you have wood with you and you have the measurements, they can make the joris. But they're the traditional ones, and from what I've heard, there aren't so many of them anymore. But also in India, if you have enough money, you'll manage, right? So you can get that done. Most of the gadas in Varanasi are made from river stones, from the river Ganga. So the famous river Ganga, it's a holy river. They're very big river stones, and they cut the stones. Then they cut a hole in it, and then they push a bamboo handle in it, and then they push extra bamboo wooden sides, and they hammer them in so it's secure, and then it's done. So it's pretty simple, and it's for those people, it's not cheap, but I'd say it's a lot cheaper than those dumbbells and kettlebells, because it's made from the river stones that are there present.
Absolutely. And the handles, bamboo. Why not wood?
Good question. Because it's a little flexible and it's stronger, I believe. So it actually, there's a little bend in when you swing it. So when you swing it, the weight is on there. It gives you that extra feeling. And I think it's also stronger than the wood. But I actually haven't really asked that question, but it's just something that came up into my mind.
There's kind of a flex to it, a bounce to it, so you can use it more likely then.
Yeah, and it's also very strong. So that definitely helps. Wood is something that it perishes pretty quick compared to bamboo. Yeah.
I've seen that a lot of the gadas are made out of cement nowadays, right?
So yeah, that is actually not something that I think was traditionally done. So I'm still not really sure if it is an actual Indian practice, or is it something that was invented by Western people to replicate them. But I have seen some concrete gadas in India as well. So I think that the process of making it from concrete actually happened in India before. but that's basically the way you can easily make a gada for your own, by putting a pot and then putting cement in it, first having the bamboo handle in it and have screws in the bamboo handle underneath. And then you put concrete on it so it secures and won't fall off. It's a pretty easy way to get a decent amount of weight in there, because you can make it pretty heavy. If you have a big pot, you can make a 20-kilogram gada pretty easily. And if you want to buy a 20-kilogram mace, they'll cost you like at least $150.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Do you have a gada that you can show for the folks to see what?
I have, my gada here, I don't have here right now, but I have it's from On It. It's a mace. It's a wooden handle. So it's comparable because the wood is light and the weight is all the way at the bottom. So that's kind of what makes a gada different than a mace. So I would say this is still more like a gada than a mace. But then again, some people say that a gada is a mace. But then, what is the difference between the ones you see in India and the ones you see here? So, but those are all vocabulary.
Absolutely. You've worked out with both, and which one do you prefer?
Good question. I think they serve different purposes. So in the south of India, you actually have smaller gadas that are more the size of the gada that Hanuman usually has, which is like a club bell. So I don't know if you know a club bell. I got one over here, big one. So a club bell is this club. So it's kind of similar to a mace, but then it's very short and the weight is also in the handle. Now this is the usual length of a gada that Hanuman has. So Hanuman is a lord. Hanuman, it's a god in Hindu, who's the god of strength. And he has a gada with a very large head and a small handle. And this is also the gada that they give to Kushti wrestlers who won. So in the south, they actually have these maces based around this gada, but then lighter, so made from wood. And they do different types of movements with it. So I'm not really sure yet, because I haven't investigated that in the south, which I'm gonna do in the near future, I hope. There are different forms, the Karlakatai, where they have like these wooden clubs and they do a lot of moves with it. While as with the gadas in Varanasi, they only do one or two moves, either one hand or two-handed. And with a mace, you can do a lot more. But that is also because it's lighter and the weight leverage is different. Like I told you already, the handle is a little heavier compared to the globe than with a gada. So you can do more movements with it. So as a versatile equipment, I like the mace a lot better, because you can actually incorporate also a lot of creativity into it, and you can relate it to martial arts,
Sure.
which is more difficult with the gada, because it's more used for wrestlers. Like you throw someone over the shoulder, that's basically the move they train. So I like them both. But I truly like the creative spark that it initiated in me when I first bought a mace. And that is something I still base my programs around, is that I like this continuous exploration of what is possible with that tool. And there's so much possible that it's like, it blows my mind every time I'm using a mace. Like you can use infinite amount of patterns, movements, pivots, lunges that are also used within a mace and with a mace. So that makes it for me more versatile than a gada.
Absolutely. And what is the ideal size for a mace?
It's about a little over 1 meter. So I think this one I just showed you, the black one is around 1 meter and 5 centimeters.
And the weight?
And weight is, for a starter mace, is between 4 and 5 kilograms. And that is for everybody, because I don't care how big you are. If you're not coaching the skill, it's very difficult to learn the skill with a 10-kilogram mace.
Absolutely.
And you'll always come back to the 5, because you can always learn new moves with the smaller one before you can apply it to a big one. So you always come back to that weight.
Is there crossovers from the jori to the GADA in movement?
There is. So the single arm swing with a mace or GADA. So let's say I use this mace for a second. They have a one arm swing, which goes around the body like this. So they don't go over the head, they stay on the same shoulder. It's actually quite complicated for most of the mace swingers. And then they have the jori, and that movement is basically where they have two of them. They go same idea. So they pull, they come in, but now they do it with two. So with the jori, you always swing with two, but if you, oops, something that always happens. So if you look at the patterns I'm doing, I'm still swinging the same way, only not continuous. I have a resting period where I swing the other one. So yeah, the swinging motions are comparable. They have a lot of similarities. So if you get good at one, you also get better at the other.
So it's something that you train that as you go on.
Yep.
You cannot lack one to win another. Now here's another one for those out there that they're trying this at home and trying to learn a little bit more. What is the correct rep per set?
Now, there's no correct rep per set.
Okay.
But it's more like a kettlebell swing than a press. So it's more in the range of 20 to 30 to 40 than going for 10. Because if you're going for 10 and your technique is good, then you have to go very, very, very heavy. Just like with a kettlebell swing. If your technique, if you have powerful hips, your technique is okay, then you'd go for and you only want to do 6 reps, you have to go for an 80 or 100 kilogram kettlebell, which is, you won't find those. And it's also because it's an explosive movement. It's about the fast twitch. The ideal rep range is higher than that. But a lot of people also swing on time. So for example, they swing for 5 minutes straight. So it's less about the rep range, but also on time. So you could also experiment with going 2 minutes on, 1 minute off, 2 minutes on. So then you also don't have to count in your head all the time, which is something that's quite nice with the GADA or mace, because it actually helps you to become more in the flow state where you actually move and, be with the body instead of thinking about how to train your body.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that makes more sense if you're going into more of a time, because most martial art competitions are done by time and they're not done by how many kicks you can do and so on and so forth. So if it's done by time,
so in this round, you can only do 20 kicks with your right leg, 10 kicks with your left leg, and then 15 with your that would be interesting.
You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of like, you can't tell a boxer you can only do 10 punches and 10 uppercuts in this one.
Yeah, that was your 10.
That's it, So it makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense.
Huh. Yeah, it does.
If folks want to get in touch with you and want to learn more, how can they do that?
If you look for the Flowing Dutchman, you'll probably find me. I have a website, functionalharbeats.com. It's actually HRBEATS. So it's part of my name, Harbert. Harbeats. That is my website. I have online courses there for the mace, and I also have a blog and some small blog. And you get some more information on those pages. And I'm very active on Instagram and YouTube, primarily.
And YouTube. Folks, number one, I want to thank you for having time to come up and express what you've done, because it's a great feat, and continue doing it. Continue documenting.
Thanks.
Continue documenting. You're in the right
I'll
track.
do.
Bravo. And thank you once more. And folks, please follow the Flowing Dutchman and he has a lot of good stuff on his YouTube channel. I follow you, and we'll learn more. Thank you for that. And it's always about learning and fellowship around the world. And hopefully one day we can meet, whether here or over there or one place. And whenever you come to the States, when you come to the States, Texas, you have a home here. All right.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks.
All righty. Until next time, much peace.
Namaste. Ram Ram.
Be safe.